Hey everyone, this is James from TeaDB here, bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am going to be talking about some content I recently published on the TeaDB blog. But before that, Denny and I are trying real hard to get to 10,000 subscribers this year in 2025. So please do subscribe if you haven't. That's just kind of our goal. No real reason other than why not to go for kind of that amount. I think we're at like 8,900 right now. So trying to get 1,100, which is a bit of a significant pace jump from what we've been averaging the last couple of years. So please do subscribe if you haven't. So today, going to be talking about kind of higher end ripe. Not going to be drinking any, but I will be releasing a couple in-between-isodes focused on a couple teas from this report. So the report is somewhat facetiously called Bad Value Ripe Report. So it's basically me drinking through a bunch of higher-end ripes, a lot of teas that are usually kind of on the dollar gram category, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, and just kind of seeing what this category is about. And so why this? Well, when I really got into tea and started drinking it seriously, 2012, 2013 range, this was not a category that was necessarily focused on very much at all. In fact, it would have been very hard for me to muster together enough teas for a report like this, just because there wasn't very many being made. While there was a lot of boutique raw pour being made, not so for ripe. And so that really has changed over the time, and now there are quite a few offerings, and in fact I didn't even necessarily cover all of them, and there are other vendors like BFZC, sold by Liquid Proust, that also have some higher end ripe offerings that could be interesting as well. So you do really start to see this tea. The earliest versions are probably in the mid-2000s. You do see a couple of those Taiwanese boutique vendors, XEH, Genuine How, making kind of these smaller run ripe productions that you still can find, and they do tend to be quite expensive. And then slowly throughout the years, you do see more and more of these happening. I do remember when White Tea released Pretty Girls, I think it was around 2015, 2016. It was something like 20 cents per gram. That was like $40 for 200 gram cape. And people were like, oh, this is crazy. How does he expect anyone to pay that money for a ripe tea? And now you fast forward 10 years and it looks pretty quaint, that sort of whole conversation, just because now we have like these big Hai Long Hao bricks that are $800, over $1,000. White tea regularly produces ripe that's pretty close to that dollar gram marker. Yunnan Sourcing also has a number of teas that are well above kind of that Pretty Girls 20 cents per gram marker too. It's interesting to kind of come in and just get a bunch of samples for this report. So I would say I targeted basically three kind of main vendors here: Hai Long Hao, White Tea, and Yunnan Sourcing. Hai Long Hao is sold by Yunnan Sourcing. And I thought that would give kind of an interesting range. So as I drank through this, I kind of subdivided it mentally into two different categories. One is kind of like this stronger, more ass-kicker type. And I think this is a little bit of an easier category to understand. It really focuses on the stronger materials. A lot of them are kind of Lao Banjiang, Bulongi types that are just really, really punchy and powerful. All of the types usually in this ripe report were more or less lighter fermented. Some are a little bit more than others, but generally speaking, I think most of the teas here were lighter fermented. So these teas really showed their punchiness and their strength. And I think it'd be very interesting to see how these teas do evolve. I think probably the highlight tea from this category is something like the Lich Tears. The Hai Long Hao Lao Banjiang was also interesting and good, but I think the Lich Tears is one, and White Tea is always doing kind of interesting blends, but that's a very strong, powerful blend that has a lot of different things going on there. The other category I would say is kind of more of this refined type. I guess one way to think about this too is kind of like if you were to do a fermentation on something like Iwu teas or whatnot. And so a couple of them are kind of more in that category. So things like the Hai Long Hao, Gaoshan Jai, he's done a couple bricks from there that are, I think, close to 75, 80 cents a gram. So a little bit cheaper than something like the Lich Tears, but not by much. Definitely pretty pricey teas too. Another great one from White Tea was the Reckless Daughter, that I would say kind of more falls into this category rather than the Asker. And again, these are lighter fermented, so you could still get kind of that bitterness there. But I think they do a little bit more in terms of complexity of aftertaste and things like that. Just sort of like the difference between kind of the Western Xishuang bonded teas, so like your Menghai County Bulong teas, and your Eastern ones from Menglai County that are more Iwu-ish or greater Iwu area. So yeah, shout outs also to my buddy Atlas. This kind of brought about partly because he wanted to drink through a bunch of white tea ripes. So I ended up ordering a couple extra samples for this report there. Let's see what else of note too. Another brand that is mentioned a couple times because Hoda has sold a couple of the ripes over the years is Shiza How. I think generally speaking, if you can get older versions of these boutique ripes, I think those do tend to be the better value ones, just because it's subject to a similar pricing dynamic as raw pour, where the Mount Cha has just gotten more increasingly expensive, and there's not necessarily a huge demand for aged ripe in the way that there is for aged raw. So I think something like the Shiza How Dragon Brick that I think LP sells for about $400. That in the end looks quite appealing because it's $400 for a 1 kilogram brick versus something like $1 a gram or more for something like Lich Tears, something around there. So in terms of value, I think the older productions are decently kind of better. So the one Dai ringer I did bring in, which I would say is equal to my favorites of the whole month, was Anchang, the 2007 one. So that's one that if you can track down on Taobao, if Taobao still works, that's a great one to get because the prices are quite low now. So I think I bought a couple more for under 20 cents a gram. And in the end, if you are very value focused on your ripe, which is, historically and remains a fairly inexpensive category, you wouldn't buy pretty much any of these teas here. So Marshall left a comment that was just like, just drink Dai, which I suppose is an appropriate way to conclude this. I think most ripe drinkers would probably fall into more of that. But if you are curious like myself and want to kind of drink through and just see what these teas are about, I do recommend checking out the report and checking out, buy some samples. I mean, that's the value of these. Very few of these are things that I have caked. It's fun to just try stuff without having the commitment of something like a cake. So thank you all for tuning in. Let me know how you like this in between. So check out that bad value ripe report, and I will see y'all next time. Cheers.